Today we are going to discuss the fourth chapter of your novel The Invisible Man. So this fourth chapter is Mr. Cuss interviews the stranger. Up to third chapter we discussed about his arrival, Teddy Henry's encounter with the stranger, and the chapter about his luggage being brought from the Bramblehurst station by Fearenside. Now here it is in the fourth chapter, it is Mr. Cuss meeting with the stranger. So after the dog incidents, nothing much happens in Iping. After that it was going normally, apart from some skirmishes between Mrs. Hall and the stranger. Of course, there were several quarrels and skirmishes between them on the matters of domestic discipline, because the stranger was quite a person of irritable temper. He was always breaking things, smashing things, would always be muttering and mumbling and littering things about in his room and the passage. So that's why Mrs. Hall would always quarrel with him for that, and she would be angry at him. But he always, though this kind of quarrels happened, but he always overrode her by some extra payment. He would just tell her, okay, you just add in the bill or charge me for that, and she would be quietened. Mr. Hall did not like the man at all, though he didn't show that ostentatiously. He never showed it before him. He always hid that, but yes, whenever he dared and whenever he got chance, he told Mrs. Hall, he talked to Mrs. Hall about the advisability of getting rid of that stranger, and she would say that let the tourists come, let it be summer when the other tourists start coming, we'll think of it that time. Because the other side of it was, she was getting the rent quite regularly and punctually. So she would say, whatever, he is a bit overbearing, but bill settled punctually, bill settled punctually. So that part of him was quite perfect, and that's why Mrs. Hall, though of course she was also troubled and she didn't like him also, she was also apprehensive and suspicious about him, still she put up with all his things, his behavior and all, just because she was getting money. At times there were several, say, quite eccentric things about him. At times he would get up quite early in the morning, come down and start doing his work. Sometimes he would get up quite late and come down quite late and would just sleep on the armchair near the fire. Sometimes it would be lot of murmuring and smashing things, cracking them down, he would be in a fitful temper most of the times. He would be talking to himself, and other times it would be totally silent. There would be no noise at all. It would be completely calm, and she would always try to guess and know that what he was muttering, and she would try to overhear, but she was never able to make any head or tail out of what he said. Communication beyond Iping, there was none. Even in Iping, he didn't talk to anybody except Mrs. Hall and Mr. Hall, and that too when he needed only. Otherwise he didn't talk to anybody there. He didn't go to churches, not on Sundays, not on the other days. He never went out in the daylight. Whenever he would go out, that would be in the complete darkness, and he chose always the loneliest path so that nobody would see him. And even in that situation he would go out completely covered, not a part of his body visible, head covered with hat, and then hands covered with gloves, and the cotton suit and boots and all that, so nothing would be visible. There would be goggles, and there would be that fake nose, of course. So he would go out in that way, and he had given strange appearances to the people of Iping, that one night when the laborers were coming, they got afraid of his ghastly appearance. One night about 9:30, when Teddy Henry was returning home, he was quite frightened by the ghastly appearance of his skull, which was lit by light falling on him from the door of an inn. So he was very much frightened by that, and people, because of that, called him Bogeyman. A song Bogeyman was quite popular at that time, and Miss Tachel had performed, had sung that song in a concert. So whenever he would pass by them, people would sing a line or two of that song and then try to imitate the occult appearance of that man, putting a hat on their head and walking in the manner he would walk. And the children also, they would, when he would pass, they would call Bogeyman after him, and then they would run away with a tremendous laughter. So the people, though they were afraid, but they enjoyed this as well. And moreover, when he would pass by, people would close their doors and windows and such. So this fear was there, and there were different opinions about him, all rife and prevailing in that Iping town. So whenever people would ask Mrs. Hall about his profession, his occupation, she would say very gingerly, stressing each syllable, that he is an experimental investigator. And when she would be asked that what an experimental investigator was, she would say very in a very overbearing manner, that only the most educated people know what an experimental investigator was, and then she would explain that he discovered things. Moreover, about his appearance, she would say that he was in an accident, and his hands and face have got completely discolored. So being of sensitive disposition, he was averse to any public notice of his appearance. That's why he is so covered. But Mr. Teddy Henry had something else to say about him. He would say that the man was hiding himself from the police. He was a criminal who had done some criminal act, and that's why he was always in that disguise, completely hiding, so that his identity shouldn't be revealed, or he shouldn't be caught by the police. Now there was another man, Mr. Gould, who was a probationary officer in a national school there, and he said that he was a kind of anarchist who was preparing explosives there, and he would try to search more about him, and this included that whenever they met or passed each other, he would look hard at him and he would ask people about him, but he was never able to come to any such conclusion, or he didn't get any strong evidence about that he was preparing explosives or any such thing. He tried to detect though. Then a group of people followed Mr. Fearenside's view that he was a piebald man, somewhere white and somewhere dark, as he had seen on the occasion when he brought the luggage from the Bramblehurst station. And there was another school of thought saying that he was a freak, that Mr. Silas Durgan. Mr. Silas Durgan said that he was a freak and he could make money by showing himself at fairs. So that was another school of thought about him. And some people said that he was a harmless lunatic. So whatever, there were different opinions about him, but there were no superstitions. People had no superstitions about him. So whatever be the opinion or whatever be the views about him, but they all agreed on one point, that he was too much for Iping. They all agreed in disliking him. Nobody in Iping liked that stranger. Now Mr. Cuss, the general practitioner of Iping, he also came to know about him, and he developed a curiosity, he developed a desire actually to meet the stranger. So the reason for that was, one, he was quite curious because he had heard that he was an experimental investigator and he is doing some experiments, and moreover he was quite jealous of him as well because he had so many bottles. So he wanted to go and meet him, but how? Because they hadn't met, there was no formal introduction between them. So how to go and ask anything or just enter his room and such. So he was quite confused about that. But one day he got an idea. He thought that he would go with an excuse of nurses fund to him to have a subscription for that. And with this idea, he went to the stranger, he knocked at the door and he entered with his permission, and then as he had thought, as he had planned, he made that excuse for nurses fund and then started talking. So he asked that what he had heard about him, that he was involved in scientific experiments and he wanted to meet him. So this kind of thing, he started that way. Now the stranger also said, yes, I had got quite late with my experiments because my papers got burnt, they were quite important, and that's the reason of the delay. So he explained in that manner. Now he further asked that what kind of experiments he was doing and what he was involved in. So listening to this, he got quite annoyed and he said that what he was fishing after. He got angry. Suddenly then what happened, through the open window there was a strong wind and it blew away the papers lying on the table. So as the papers were quite important for him, he ran after those papers to catch and save them, but it was of no use because the papers got into the fireplace, they got completely burned and then just vanished through the chimney. Yes. Now, but at this time, at this point, a strange thing happened. Mr. Cuss happened to see something strange. He saw that actually all this time when they were talking, his hands were in his pockets and he was continuously sneezing, but he didn't take out his hands from his pockets. But when he had to run, he took out his hands and ran after those papers. At that point, Mr. Cuss saw that it was empty. After the sleeves, there was nothing. And moreover, he happened to see through the sleeves as well. And there too, it was empty, there was nothing, and this made him quite alarmed. He was quite frightened, he was all aghast. And when when the stranger returned, he was telling, all gasping and saying that how the devil you can move that empty sleeve. I saw there was nothing, no hands, the sleeve was empty. At this, the stranger first said nothing, then came very close to him and he raised his hands. It was quite close to his face, and then it was just 6 inches away. He could see all that. And then something like a thumb and a finger pinched his nose. Mr. Cuss got so much frightened that he at once turned and ran away without looking here and there, not speaking to anybody there. He ran directly to the vicar, Mr. Bunting, the priest of that area, Iping. So he ran to vicar because they were close friends, and reaching there he was like all alarmed and all panting and puffing and was saying, "Am I mad? Have I had visions?" He was talking like that, and Mr. Bunting said, "Yes, tell me, what's the matter? What's the matter?" So first he asked for some drink. Mr. Bunting only had a cheap sherry to offer him. He drank that and told him that all the things that I went to him and talked to him, and he got annoyed and he said, "What are you fishing after?" And I happened to see that the sleeves were empty, there was nothing. He reported all the things whatever he saw and happened there. But Mr. Bunting couldn't believe all that. He simply he thought that it must be some hallucination or something like that, and he said it was a remarkable story. He only laughed and said it was a remarkable story. So he, of course, how could one believe that a person could be without hands? So he also couldn't believe that. He only thought that it was just a story and he might have had some hallucination. So apart from this, I said that up to, actually he reached Iping in the month of February, and up till the end of April everything was proper, there was no problem. But after that, about the end of the April, he started having problems because he was running short of money. There was no source of regular income, and that's why now it was quite difficult for him to pay the rent regularly. So he would say to Mrs. Hall that whenever, soon I am going to have some money and I'll pay you then. So in that way he was postponing things. He would just calm her down whenever she would ask for the rent, and so this is all about your fourth chapter. For more details, for the next chapters, continue watching the videos uploaded by me. Thank you very much for watching this video.